Well, today's President's Day. It's a federal holiday. Meanwhile, cancel culture coming for some of America's presidents. Last month, the San Francisco School Board voted to strip the names of dozens of very famous historical figures, including, as you can see right there, Abe Lincoln, George Washington, Abe Lincoln from schools, and a bust of George Washington in Watsonville, California, is being removed from a plaza, being moved to a library. Some had wanted it in a landfill. Well, on this President's Day, instead of erasing history, we're honoring America's presidents. Joining us right now is one of America's finest presidential historians, Doug Wead, who joins us from down in Florida. Doug, good morning to you.
Hey, good morning, Steve.
What do you make of this movement? And we've been talking about it over the last couple of weeks here on the news channel about the movement to get rid of names like George Washington and Lincoln, Jefferson, Revere, Francis Scott Key, and even Dianne Feinstein down there, because apparently in the 80s when she was mayor, they flew a Confederate flag on some city property. What do you make of this?
Well, each precious step that people take towards freedom and freedom of speech should be cherished and remembered and celebrated. There'd be no discussion today about social justice without Martin Luther King, and they're already attacking him. And there'd be no Martin Luther King without Abraham Lincoln. And there'd be no Abraham Lincoln without George Washington. So yes, some of the early founding fathers, Washington, Jefferson, others had slaves, but seen within the context of their time, they were risking their lives to step towards freedom. The ancient democracy of Greece, half the population were slaves. But if they hadn't taken those steps, we wouldn't have the freedom that we have today.
See, I think what you just touched on is so important. You were talking about the context of their times. You know, when you look back at history, there were some bad things that happened throughout history, and that is part of the context of their time. But nonetheless, you say when you look at the fact that, you know, these were some of our founding fathers at a time of slavery, does that mean we just erase everything?
No, we can examine their records, but Steve, there's no end in sight to this. The British Empire had slavery until 1834. We'd have to rename Virginia, which was named after Queen Elizabeth I. There are 5 Indian Native American nations that own slaves. We're talking about every little stream and river and town and village and some of the American states that would have to be renamed. There's Columbus, the arguments against him. You'd have to change CBS, Columbia Broadcasting System, Washington District of Columbia. There's just no end in sight, and it's ridiculous. Slavery, the name comes from the Slavs, who were people that were ordered to work by the Islamic warlords of their time. It's not Afrocentric. It's a problem of human nature, and we need to study it. But we also need to celebrate the people who risked their lives to get rid of it.
And on this President's Day, we celebrate our nation's presidents, and nobody has written better books than Doug Wead. Check him out on Amazon. He's got a whole library full of his books down there in Naples. Doug, thank you very much for joining us today.
Steve, I got something very funny to leave you with.
Quick.
In the Soviet Union, they started saying, the people, their sense of humor, they started saying the past is unpredictable because they were always changing.
Indeed. Doug, thank you. We'll be right back.